Henry, I was really worried about what the way forward is, and the immediate thought that struck me was that education is the answer. There's clearly a huge gap in community understanding of exactly what's going on, where it came from, and where it could lead to. What's your thought?
Well, first of all, I never thought I would be sitting on cocktail stools with two such distinguished companions. And if they had told me on top of it that I'd be sitting on cocktail stools without a cocktail, that would make me even more puzzled. But nonetheless, obviously your question is a vital one and a very important one. And I entirely agree that education has a very significant role. But can I put to you two caveats in that respect? Because one of the interesting things is, if you look at really the great liberal thinkers, and I would go back as far as Montaigne, and through Benjamin Constant, and on to Tocqueville, and John Stuart Mill, and so on. They all had immense faith in the proposition that education makes people naturally more tolerant. And that if you educate people, you open their mind, and an open mind is a mind that will display what I referred to as the liberal temper, a temper that is questioning, not too sure of itself, knows the difference between righteousness and self-righteousness, and is willing to envisage the consequences of that difference. But when you look at the world around us, you actually find it quite difficult to hold that belief. Here we are in a world where, at least in the West, in Australia and many other countries, more people are going through the education system than at any time in history. And yet, what are we producing? We're producing people, many of whom, not all of whom, but many of whom are narrow-minded, deeply intolerant, profoundly illiberal. Now, in part, that must be the result of the way we teach and what we're teaching, and perhaps, indeed, I think surely, both of those are at fault. But I think there's another thing, or another aspect of it, which is this, and which, interestingly enough, I'm no specialist in this area, but that emerges from the material I've read. For instance, in the US, more educated people are much more polarized politically and ideologically than less educated people, and much more hostile to people who hold views different from their own. Now, that is not, when you reflect on it, all that surprising, because the more educated you are, the more important your ideas are to yourself. The more value you place on your own ideas. And the harder you find it to deal with cognitive dissonance. Cognitive dissonance, a challenge to your ideas, is a challenge to your being. And more educated people tend to have more coherent sets of ideas than less educated people. Less educated people tend to have syncretic constellations of opinions. And they're used to not knowing much about many, many things. More educated people are used to knowing, or at least believing they know, a lot about what they believe they know. And as a result, and this brings me to the second point, the answer is not education per se. It's an education in dealing with the limits of education. It's an education in dealing with the limits of how much we can each know, how much we can each confidently assert, and how much doubt we have to have as we navigate through the many shades of grey that make up human existence. And so, with that, if we can devise an education system which does more in that respect, I agree with you. If it's just more of the same, I fear we could aggravate the problem rather than cure it.